Let's talk about the power of closure. Hi, this is Justin Hitt from Inside Strategic Relations. If you want to develop influence, wealth, and prosperity, if you want to be able to get things done as a high-income professional entrepreneur, you need to understand the concept of closure. That means that every activity, project, effort, initiative must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, it's very important that the beginning addresses important and valuable issues, that the middle is focused and short, and that the end actually comes. Have you ever been in a situation where you're doing a business initiative or a project, or you've got findings, and it just seems everybody's kicking the can down the road? The solution never comes. Everybody talks about the problem. Everybody has excuses around the problem and reasons why the problem exists, but nobody stepped in and provided answers. Well, what you're learning here with Strategic Relations through the Inside Strategic Relations program is what I've been doing for years as kind of a fixer. Now, it's a difficult situation to be in because my personality allows me to be blunt and explain the risks and the frustrations and the problems that people face. But at times it makes me the bad guy. So it's not a position you can stay in for a long time in a company because you're simply calling people out. And if you're not Lee Iacocca, or have some kind of influence position, very often you can be a tool of leadership to solve the problems, and then they move you on and you end up there's some frustrations that can happen. But here's my point. I mentioned Lee Iacocca. At one time when Chrysler was having problems, Lee Iacocca took each employee, at least through the middle management, into his office, put them in front of a whiteboard or chalkboard at the time, and said, "Show me on this board how you help the customer." Now, there probably was a more complex discussion in that, but it was the person who came in the room, and they were supposed to draw on the board or describe on the board exactly what they did to bring value to the organization, to take the organization to the next level. And those people who failed to demonstrate in that short period of time their value to the organization were fired. They were let go. They didn't go back to their office. They went home. Now, what Lee Iacocca in several interviews explained is that if he fired somebody or let them go who was really needed, then he can simply hire them back. Now, you might have to pay a little extra for it because he has to apologize, but ultimately, there was no loss in letting go the people who couldn't demonstrate their contribution to the organization. And I almost think it's a responsibility of the organization to let people go who are not performing. I've been on the short end of the stick during base realignments or RIFs, very much because I had the highest income in the group. And very often I was paid much more than what the typical person of my age, the typical person of my degree, experience, and otherwise, because that's just the way life is. I tend to get paid more than everybody else in the room for various reasons. Now, ultimately, if you're in that situation, you could get skimmed off the top because they're trying to lower costs. You could get skimmed off the top because you've been too aggressive. Even though you're getting things done, you're frustrating people, and it's difficult because the majority of the people you work with don't want to get things done. And that goes back around to getting to the point. Many projects continue forever. Change, if you have a kitchen remodeled, there are guys that like camping in your kitchen. They're just remodeling this. And then, oh, by the way, can you do this as well? It's called project creep. But the same thing happens in corporations. The same thing happens in your business. If there's no definite beginning, middle, and end, very often a project will go on forever. And it happens because of the psychology of self-preservation. Every person on that job knows how difficult it can be in the marketplace to get another high-income position. Everybody else in that company believes they have shared experience or a experience that makes them more suited to continue doing the work that they've done. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of that adaptation that's necessary to survive in a very complex environment. But often people get complacent. It's the work they're used to doing. Now, the economy's changed, the workplace has changed, the way companies organize has changed. I truly believe the best type of organization is one who can construct and deconstruct itself many times over to adapt to the needs of a marketplace. That way, if a customer wants X, they can be agile like a smaller entrepreneur organization, yet have the financial stability of a large organization by having both liberal and conservative practices. Maybe they're conservative with their reserve funds so that they have the money available to pay for the project that they're doing, but they're liberal in the sense of how they reach for stretch goals. Now, ultimately, doesn't matter if you have a stretch goal or it's a routine business as usual activity, if the work never stops, it's a different type of work. So that work that is repetitive is work that you use arbitrage, outsourcing, you use folks that are doing routine work inside of like a manufacturing facility, you use software and automation, and those activities are not done by high-income professionals. So once it's automated, Henry Ford set up his assembly line and he put lower-waged people on the assembly line. That's how it works. Engineers design it, people build it, a couple prototypes get built, then they equip out the assembly line, and then you manufacture it and get it done. Now, somebody on an assembly line understands the beginning, middle, and end concept. They receive a piece of work, they do work to it, they finish it, and they send it to the next one on the line. This is what you would see in a SIPOC, where you'd see sources of inputs and specific outputs based on a goal or an objective. The problem comes is when the projects stretch out a little bit, when the project is 90 days, 120 days, 2 years. But you still must break that project down into little chunks. Otherwise, it is not going to get done. It's going to creep out. It's going to have issues and problems. And then some expensive consultant's going to show up like me and call you to the carpet and say, if you can't provide this basic information, then how are you going to complete the whole job? I'm recommending the whole project gets shut down. Show me in 12 days how you're going to get back on track. That's just the way it works. Now, this skill is valuable because this is what businesses need. Every corporation, every organization has 20 to 30% in fat. That's 20 or 30% in your project portfolio. We've talked about that in other programs. That list of projects that you have on your plate, 20 to 30% of that work, if you just stop doing it, nobody would notice. It would just go away. Now, the skill is in evaluating what's the important work and what's the unimportant work, what work can be automated, what work needs specialists. But the power comes in your ability to make a decision, your ability to decide, we're going to start this work and we're going to finish this work. Now, if you have work, and this is where the juxtaposition that really blows people's minds, if you have work, and let's say you've invested 3 months in it and you haven't met your milestones, do you add more people and work harder? Do you adjust your milestones? Or do you simply cancel the project and put somebody else on the job? See, that's a tough question. Well, if you have projected milestones and you're not meeting your milestones, no sense going on and starting other work. Those in the situation, the processes, the people involved need to be reevaluated. That takes a perspective that very often people don't want to address. It's much more comfortable for the majority of the population to provide excuses rather than sit down with Fred and say, Fred, I've asked you to do these 5 things. You estimate it, Fred estimated it's going to take a week, and it's 3 weeks later and none of it's done. Fred, you're dead. You're out of here. This is the way it works. Now, what's interesting is at the high-income professional level, when your peers make high incomes, very often we don't want to fire each other because we know how hard it can be for some to go find another position. That's why I put together the Dreaming Job System, because it's not hard at all to basically propose your new future income and get it. It's not difficult at all to have multiple streams of income or to find a new career position or to shift between positions to stay in front of inflation. It's not hard, but the majority of people believe it's difficult, so high-income people tend not to fire high-income people. We usually sit around and wait until human resources lays off a bunch of folks or otherwise some outside thing happens. Automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, streamlining, a plant getting shut down. But in the rest of the world, if you're working a 9-to-5 job, making an hourly wage, and you screw up your job and you do your work wrong, auto mechanic, by the way, which could be a 6-figure position, but auto mechanic has 2 helpers. One helper was asked to go prep the tools. The other helper was asked to prep the materials. The auto mechanic shows up, the vehicle is up on the rack, and the tools are not there. How many times do you think that would happen before the auto mechanic fires the person responsible for tools? It would only happen like once or twice. It would not happen much at all. In fact, when I was in high school, I worked in a machine shop, and my job was to simply get the tools on site so the auto mechanic can do what he needs to do, and then stand there and hand the auto mechanic stuff. They were working on big trucks and things. to hand the mechanic the tools they asked for. Not to think about it, not to get a plan together to do it, not to strategize about the implementation and do a diversity program. When the dude under the truck says, give me a 1/4-inch wrench, I grab it. Give me a 12mm wrench, I grab it. And then afterwards, he throws the tools into a bucket on the other side, which I washed out and then put back in the tool rack so I could be prepped again for the next repair. This diesel mechanic was making 6 figures. I'm making minimum wage. And the difference is not in the value of the individual to the work. It's in the understanding that these procedures, these controls, these anticipation of market needs are the foundation to accomplish big and great things. Now, when you've got a volume of things you want to accomplish, you tend to package those in projects. And when your project has a specific beginning, middle, and end, some projects are just gonna happen. It's a non-event. But for the projects that don't, for the projects that linger, for the projects that have funding issues, for the projects that have resource issues, you must do something. Now, I hope as a teacher with these inside strategic relations or these strategic relations methodologies, I'm helping you do this in such a way that cultivates relationships. I, at times, am very blunt and straightforward and hurt people's feelings. Now, in a corporate environment with politics, that's not a good idea. And I'm not meaning to do it. It's just a personality thing. I've worked with computers most of my life, and I've worked with people not in physical proximity. I've always talked to them on the phone and stuff. So that's just a challenge I have. But when you're face to face, you need to be a little more tactful. And we've got resources to help you with that. We also have resources to help you with understanding that when a decision needs to be made, it's better to make a decision now so you can take your problem and A/B option it. We can either go A or B. And then if you just simply make a decision to go A or B, you very often can get down the line doing something. And then if you find out it's the wrong thing, you can come back and do the other option. And so what this gives you is the ability to make tough decisions, to get better results, and to drive forward the outcomes that ultimately benefit everybody involved. Because if you're protecting people who are not doing their job, if you're protecting people who produce low quality outputs, if you're protecting high incomes versus automating a business as usual process and distributing it over lower incomes, then you're really wrecking out a lot of opportunity for everybody. In fact, every high income professional is getting older, and as they get older, they may not want to be still working, and you may give them the opportunity to do so in other ways. That's why we talk about multiple streams of income. That's why our sister publication talks about sustainable wealth. That's why we talk about building teams in a way that gets things done. And ultimately, every project has a beginning, middle, and end. And if that project isn't on task, if that project isn't moving the way it's supposed to, then it is your top priority to eliminate it, to finish it, to move it forward so that you can take those resources and apply them someplace else that has a greater value, a greater utility, a greater outcome. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, and I know if I don't give you the greatest value and resources, that you're probably going to leave me behind and you won't want to be my friend on this podcast. But that's okay with me, because what you're hearing here is just the tip of the iceberg of the resources and programs that are available at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. We provide some consulting services subject to availability. We also have a number of private clients, but I've got more than 2 decades worth of materials and lessons learned and project work that I can really help you with. And if you're interested in that, at least ask your questions. If you've got a question about how to build influence in a marketplace, how to become the authority or the expert that everybody goes to be the in-demand subject matter expert, how to become a person whose income outstrips inflation and grows faster than your costs, how to build real stability so that you don't really fear about losing your job or your company failing, you just move along. Well, you're in the right place, and that's Inside Strategic Relations. Again, this program has about starting something of value, working on it, and then finishing it before you move on to the next thing. This is no guarantee you're not going to end up with a bunch of unfinished projects, but it at least focuses your resources and energy on the most important thing. And the last thing I want to leave you with is the most important thing is that you have the skills to transform business relationships into profits guaranteed. Now, again, I'm Justin Hitt from Inside Strategic Relations. You can ask your questions at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Thanks for listening.